Hi, I'm Amber Young,
And this is Barbara Phillips.
and this is
Let's Talk EVM. So perfect.
Yay! All right, welcome everyone to our podcast. I'm going to start with a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is said for myself and Barbara.
Yes.
And it is that all of the views that are expressed here are our own, and they are not the views of the United States government. So with that, I'm going to start us off with Barbara's soapbox moment.
Okay, thank you so much, Amber. I'm super excited because we are here in the great state of Florida, in Destin, at the Empower Users Group. And we were just chatting it up today at the beautiful happy hour out on the lawn and talking to our friend Steve Price.
Jim.
Or Jim. Jim Price. I do know him, actually. I shouldn't have said that. But, just talking to him about ticking and tying the tool with the latest DID and the DRDs out there and how complicated it is. I mean, who's on first? So we are excited to learn more about that in the days coming with us, before us. But now, if I may, Amber, I have the great pleasure of introducing the scheduling sharpshooter, Janay Bloch. She's going to introduce herself, and then we have a million questions of her, just like a million shots at the free throw line that she's going to talk about. So anyway, we have the great pleasure of having Janay with us, and she's going to tell us for a minute, and then we have a bunch of questions. I'm repeating myself, but anyway, thank you.
Hi, I'm Janay Bloch. I'm with ClearPlan Consulting. I am a senior manager at ClearPlan. I am responsible for work, for people, for recruiting, and earned value, and helping our consultants.
Okay. Awesome. And I have worked with Janay for many years, longer than I realized, actually. She's kind of helping me remember some of the first times we met. But with that, I do know her as, I want to say, a master scheduler, which is its own special title in the world of scheduling. So we wanted to talk to her about scheduling today. And we want to start with Janay. How did you get into scheduling?
So my career started in aerospace at Cessna Aircraft. I started in the commercial side of scheduling. Did that for about 8 years and went to, my husband moved me to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and went to work for Honeywell and became a scheduler in Microsoft Project. I was working a weekly earned value program. I had started in scheduling, did scheduling for about 1.5 years and then moved over to cost. Worked in Cobra, got into cost there. Moved on from Honeywell. My husband actually moved me to Fort Worth, Texas, took a job with Lockheed Martin and got into weekly earned value again. Was doing weekly earned value as a master scheduler in OpenPlan.
Janay, when we talked to you prior to getting you on the podcast, you talked about the role of your transitioning from scheduling to the cost side. Do you want to illuminate on that when you're telling us a little bit about your history?
Sure, absolutely. So I started in scheduling in Microsoft Project. I actually had a great gal. We were a sub to a prime. She was phenomenal. These were the days before Teams, and helped me in scheduling, to learn scheduling. I was working along with a finance gal, and we were struggling a little bit getting change control done and things like that. And so I moved over and started working in Cobra and doing cost at the same time, which was great, right? Learning scheduling, understanding scheduling. We were not resource loading either. So when going into the cost side, I got to see a lot more of the plan, the dollars, the hours, things like that. So yeah.
Do you think that's a big, how do you feel about schedulers really understanding the cost side? So do you want to speak to that?
Absolutely. I think it's extremely important. I think it makes a better scheduler when they understand the cost side of the business. But I also think it would make a better cost person if you know scheduling. So both of them.
I know that when we had Lisa Hastings on the broadcast, she said that out at her shop, they just call them program control analysts. There is no scheduler job, there's no resource job. Everybody is project control. And it is always that combination. So is that what you're saying is like,
Yeah, absolutely. I think some companies actually do both cost and schedule. I also think it's dependent on the size of the company. So when you have larger larger contractors, it's easier for them to segregate cost and schedule people, and just have one or the other rather than both. But when you have smaller programs that are more manageable, I think doing both is very important.
And just the other food for thought, literally had this thought during dinner tonight after the reception with one of your team members, Janay, talking about the opportunities for rotations, right? So when you're in a company and potentially doing like 6 months scheduling, 6 months cost, going into the different areas so that you can have that experience. I think that would be really tremendous. I don't know many places that do that, but I think it's a very good opportunity, for folks to get that cross-pollination. So
Absolutely. The other important thing is proposals. So, as a master scheduler, if you've worked proposals, you get to see the WBS, right? The architecture of your program. The architecture of your program is so important, especially in earned value, because then that's going to help with your accuracy, right? The more structure you have, the more defined structure, the program architecture that you set up, the more mapping that you do, the more accurate your project's set up as far as your control accounts, work packages, and things like that.
Okay. And that leads us to a question that we kind of tossed around, and that's the idea of the IMS dictionary. So we've talked about it, and I've seen you in action with it, and I understand it to some extent. And you say mapping, and so please explain, what is the IMS dictionary? Why does it matter, and how is it a communication tool?
Yeah, so that is probably one of my biggest pet peeves in scheduling is every schedule should have a IMS dictionary. It's a communication tool. It shows your architecture and how things are set up. It's your field mapping. It shows your integration and shows accuracy to your program.
What does it look like? Like the mechanics. So what is an IMS dictionary?
It is all the fields that you use in your IMS to manage your program.
With like a definition or something.
Yes, absolutely. It's columns in the field that you define, and then you have the dictionary defines what you're using it for. So for instance, if it's a control account, right? What is your control account? Your control account is throughout your entire architecture. And so the IMS dictionary will show the column that's used. It could be a text field, it could be a
date field,
spring field. Yes, yeah. All sorts of fields.
So a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, competing with Janay's, is how do you feel about flowing down
the
IMS Data Dictionary?
It absolutely is important to flow that down. In fact, as you're building your IMS, you should be building your IMS dictionary. Your IMS dictionary will be finalized when you baseline your program. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't change. You can update your IMS dictionary as other fields come in and things like that. But it's a communication tool. So it's not even just between the contractor and the government. It's also between your team within the contractor. People move jobs all the time. So people inherit schedules all the time. So an IMS dictionary is a communication tool to explain how the IMS is set up and how it's being used.
Do you find that when you're building it, do you build it with consensus with your subcontractors, or do you build it and then dictate it?
I would probably say it's better to communicate with your contractor, but I also will say sometimes it's probably better to dictate in order because it's going to be flowed down, right? So if you're a prime to a sub, you'll have an estrel that will say what fields need to be in that. And that's exactly how I learned. So when my very first program I was on, I was a sub to a major defense contractor, and they flowed down everything we were supposed to do. So that's how I learned. So absolutely.
I think these things are always a little bit more fun when there's a story.
Okay.
So once upon a time, I was in a sub position, and it was all about Winsight back in the day. And we were a sub, and they dictated the columns that they wanted, uniquely defined when we exported our UNC fact for them to. And I mean, we had to go into the TXT field file and like change column 1 to be XYZ and column 2. I mean, it was really, but you know what? To your point, it is so specific. It was like a pleasure to do it. Let us just give you the data the way you want it so that you can roll it up and see the big picture. And it's all about coding, right? And IPMDAR is all about coding. Do you want to comment? Do you think IPMDAR is good or bad for the field?
And also the DOE CPP JSON did.
True.
Absolutely. Structure is very important, right? I mean, you've got to define how you want something, or they're not going to send it to you that way, right? I mean,
And then what are you doing? You're spending half the month fixing it.
that's right.
And even another area is benchmarking, right? So cost estimating and benchmarking and doing comparisons from prior to future similar types of projects and scope is really critical for there to be some standardization, right?
Yeah.
So I believe in data structures.
Absolutely. I think that an IMS dictionary is absolutely one of the most important parts as you're building your schedule. It's just your communication on how your schedule is being built and how you're using it to manage. Now, can you use other fields? So if the prime was to give me, fields to use, can I add others? Absolutely. You just want to communicate in your IMS dictionary what those fields are. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to transition now into a little bit of a different topic that's also similar. So as we were planning this session, just for everyone's awareness, a little bit on Janay. She did not do this on her backstory, but she's a sharpshooter because...
Oh, I played basketball. That's why.
She can shoot hoops, and I am like the least qualified person to even make any sort of reference to sports because I just don't understand them. I try to, but I don't have experience. So Janay was playing basketball, I believe, in college.
I did,
Yeah.
Long ago.
What'd you play for?
I played for Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee.
Sweet.
Nice. Yeah.
And I believe that she
Ages.
takes that same type of focus and applies it to scheduling now. So she's a sharpshooter in the world of scheduling as well. And with that, thinking about the data dictionary, thinking about structures, we talked a little bit with Janay earlier about the accuracy of schedules and why that matters. And you had given some examples. So any thoughts on the accuracy of schedules?
Yeah, one of the things that maybe I didn't mention earlier is I worked for the government for about 4 years and did compliance. As a consultant, I've also done compliance. And so I am a big fan of compliance. I'm a big fan of accuracy in schedules. Without the accuracy, I've seen a lot of schedules in really bad shape, and it's very difficult to actually believe their schedule, right? So I think an accurate schedule is very important. Health metrics are very important to run, weekly if you can, right? I'm a big fan of weekly status as well. I don't. Yeah.
Actually, I had it in my notes today about because you mentioned it twice in your intro comments about weekly EV or weekly status. Do you want to elaborate on the value proposition of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a lot of programs have really get, I guess have a hard time understanding their actuals. And when you get actuals that come in weekly, why not do status weekly? So if you status weekly and actuals come in, then it's at least a comparison for you to be able to look to see, to make sure, is it accurate? If you wait 4 weeks to status, people they forget what's going on. It's really not that difficult to status weekly. When I did weekly EV, we actually had to provide a schedule weekly to the contractor rather than just monthly. And then we did hours weekly and dollars monthly.
I mean, that's the best of all possible worlds. I mean, right. I mean, it's one thing to do all the calculations, make sure your rates are in place and connect it to your invoice and all those sorts of things. But I mean, people put their time cards in.
That's right.
People do make time card errors, plus or minus. Sure. Okay. It's always an estimate by definition anyway. So, okay. So yeah, get the hours in. I mean, earned value by hours is grossly under practiced.
I would say I don't see it anymore today.
Okay,
I did
okay.
it for 2005 to 2011. I was
Wow.
working a weekly EV program. Actuals come in, and if you're not taking status, you don't actually go look to make sure that the actuals that are coming in are going against the right charge number that it should be. So
Right.
if you're taking status, you can at least look at your weekly status, see where status is coming in, and as actuals come in, then it's pretty easy for them to go back and look and see it.
Oh my gosh, you got me on fire here because so often you see people look at the who charged,
Yep.
the who charged report, and then decide work was done.
Oh, yep.
And what you're talking about is not allowing that because you've then looked at the performance, recognized, okay, people have charged, but often people don't look at what work was performed, where the status of the schedule is, and they just look at, oh, Jade charged 40 hours this week, therefore work got done. Well, maybe actually in your job, probably work was done. But the rest of the world, when you're talking about discrete work, that doesn't mean anything. That just means that you came to work that day. You don't know how much work was done. And so that comparison, I think that projects that are really using the data to make informed decisions are really doing weekly EVM and maybe even by the hours, because it's very informative for corrective action. And I don't know what the top, we should probably have an episode on this, top three critiques of EVM, but certainly the people have a habit at where I work to say, oh, it's overcome by events. Oh, that's last month's data, without recognizing, of course, the value proposition of forecasting, the forecasting value of the performance data. They're just saying, well, okay, that was the CPI last month, but what is it this month? Well, this month hasn't ended, so you don't know I mean, you know what I mean? But they're so focused on that without recognizing, hey, now we have this trending data, we can look at the forecast. But I think the weekly data, that's the money.
Well, and when you take weekly status, you can start, if your baseline is off, right, you can start looking at your current execution indice, right? And so if you status weekly, you'll also start seeing where cams kick the can, right? And start pushing things out and moving things out. So as things start getting late, if not, you do it once a month. So if you think about taking weekly status, you're going to start seeing your cams move things further out, whereas monthly, it's just less cycles to do it. More cams, I think with weekly status, they have a better understanding. As a scheduler, you wouldn't believe how many times a cam will walk in and what is this activity? What does this task mean? I'm not exactly sure. But if you status with them on a weekly basis, it just makes them see the data more and more and more and have a better understanding.
We talk about weekly statusing, and that is my voice is cracking because it's wonderful, and I haven't seen it recently. It just makes sense as we have the ability to collect information in much more rapid pace and have that information more real time available to people. And then it brings me back to IP2M meter and people and communication and culture, and having that culture of doing this type of rigor, right, as a whole organization. I think that just benefits everyone. So we're going to transition next to the next topic on our sharpshooting area. What are we going to look at? And that's internal surveillance. So Janay, you had the opportunity to work with DCMA and saw that level of surveillance, but we also want to talk about internal surveillance. So give us some of your initial thoughts on internal surveillance, and we'll start exploring that.
Sure. One of the things I think is important as a scheduler is to actually work in the compliance organization. Okay. And I think probably that what has helped me even more was that I started out as a scheduler, cost analyst, and then went to the government and did a lot of analysis on schedules. Internal surveillance is very important on a program, but it's also very important for project controls people because they get a better understanding of earned value in an internal surveillance environment. A lot of contracts, right, have EVM light. And so
we sometimes shudder at that term. Yes.
and so, internal surveillance is important. It also helps project controls people understand more side of earned value. As a scheduler, you don't see a lot of schedulers that maybe do surveillance or EVMS. It tends to be cost analysts that get into EVMS. And it would be good to see more schedulers in, we just don't see that as much as we used to. Maybe.
Well, I hope that people like you, Janay, can help forge the way to bring more schedulers into EVM. It definitely would benefit the whole industry and field.
I mean, what I want to ask you is what happened to the 14 point?
Ooh.
Where are we? What is it? Is it here to stay? Has it gone away? What's wrong with it? Why doesn't DCMA use it anymore? I mean, what is going on? And the 14 point well, Janay will explain it, but I mean, some of us novice schedulers learned a lot about scheduling by running the 14 point and seeing where we had orphan tasks, out of sequence, excessive float, excessive duration. And so what are your thoughts on the old fashioned 14 point?
I mean, the 14 point is a health assessment of your schedule. It's a combination of, I don't know, 10 tests or so.
It's 14.
There you go. Right, 14 tests. 14 tests. You're right. 14. What am I thinking? 14 tests. It's 14 tests, right? But I think there's a lot of other tests that you can do for schedule health metrics. Out of sequence is actually not one of them, right? And I think it's a very good test. So I think back in the day when they started the 14 point, it was a health assessment. It was a place that they started from, but I think it's evolved into a lot other things. Just like I mentioned a minute ago, I'm a big fan in executing schedules, looking at your current execution index, and that's not one of them either.
Why don't you tell our listeners what the current execution index is?
So if I was statusing weekly, what that current execution is, how am I performing to what I said I was going to do last week? And then how do I do from the week before and from the week before? So each week that you status, it's just going to be from each point. But you can go back and see how things have moved.
How poorly.
That's right. That's right.
Kick the key.
How poorly or well you've estimated. Today I was taking a class taught by Roland Atencio from Encore here at the Empower Users Group, which I've learned is called the OOG. OOG, yes. Yes. So today in our class, oh, you distracted me, Barbara. Barbara's distracting me. I'll come back to it. Come.
Okay. So I really want to focus in. I'm sorry to bring the conversation back to the 14 point, but I was recently on chatting it up with people, and they were talking about how DCMA is still using it. But I've never heard that. I heard that from a third party, and I was like, I thought DCMA retired it. They're full of the decums.
Yeah. And
I didn't know that they were still even referencing it. I mean, I know it's still in the tools. I know Steel Ray still has it, and SSI tool and Fuse and so forth, Empower. But it just seemed like industry held on to it longer than the government did. And I think that, in my opinion, one of the things that went south with it is that, of course, nobody wants to be read. We've talked about being read on this podcast before. Nobody wants to be read. So, even though just red means, okay, we have that and we just write down our justification and that's why we're red. Yeah, we have a lot of float and these are the reasons, stop, kind of a thing. And I think that the problem with the 14 point is that it became very like 0, 1. And then people kind of gave up on it. But I think it's made a resurgence. But we'll talk to maybe other people about why it's made a resurgence. It's such a simple kind of, but I didn't realize it didn't have the out of sequence in it. No, but out of sequence is why you need a tool because you can't find those out. I mean, out of sequence means you've baked the bread, but you haven't mixed the dough and you can't hardly find that. So basically you've status a task in the schedule, but you haven't recognized or status the predecessors that led to that task. But Microsoft Project will let you do that. And then your critical path is out the window and you're searching for it.
Well, I actually can remember a schedule I analyzed when I was supporting the Department of Energy, and the very first activity had negative float on the schedule. That was the very first activity of the schedule, and the activity was out of sequence, so the entire critical path was invalid. So that's why you need to look at your out of sequence activities. That's why health assessments are so important.
That if the critical path is not valid, right? That is a completely inaccurate schedule. You can't trust it. You can't trust the schedule. Okay, so I did remember, Barbara, after you distracted me. Today in our class, we talked about CEI, which is near and dear to my heart. Current execution index, but we also went into baseline execution index, BEI, but then we also went into BRI and BPI. So BRI is the baseline realism index, BPI is the baseline performance index, and Ivan Bembers, who was one of our guests, he actually did a study and developed a chart. When we had him on the first time, I try to remember the name of that chart. It was the BRI, Baseline Realism Index chart, which is really, really, really cool. It's available on Empower. Yes. So that's a lot of ways to determine if your schedule is credible, if it's realistic, and then when we look at schedules, we look at the baseline and the forecast, right? So you need to look at, is your baseline credible and reliable, but also your forecast. And often when we're looking at performance, like where are we actually going? That's in the world of forecast, because that's like where we're actually know we're headed, and forecasts and EACs and anything in that space. So kind of some fun stuff there. All right. So we're getting close to the end of our time. I think we're going to wrap up with one last topic for Miss Janay, and that is talking a little bit about teaching the importance of EVM. Why do you think EVM matters, Janay?
I mean, earned value is what we have out there to measure us today, right? So that's really our only way that we can show performance and how we're performing on contracts. So earned value is very important, but accurate, reliable data is also very important when it comes to earned value. We talked a little bit ago about EV Light. I mean, EV Light, I'm not really sure what that is, right? Other than the fact that it's not exactly what all of the guidelines say that you have to measure to. So obviously, when you're doing something light, you're probably not doing something when it comes to it.
I mean, in the world of a healthy, accurate schedule, there is no light. There is just accurate or not accurate.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, health metrics, analyzing schedules, right? And as an analyst, or even when I worked for DCMA or as a consultant working for the DOE, looking at dates and things, it's a guess, right? So you have to.
It's always an estimate.
It is. You have to look at the health of the schedule, right? You have to ask questions to be able to understand whether or not your schedule is real. You have to have a critical path that makes sense, right? And then the health of your schedule needs to be there, right? You can't have lots of missing predecessors, successors, lots of high float, lots of negative float, things like that, or your schedule is not reliable.
I think that one of the last questions we had for you was about Janay. Do you think that there's more than one way to calculate the critical path?
Do I think there's more than one way to calculate the critical path? I think the tool calculates the critical path, right? I think that you can go in and manipulate it to say something different if you want to, right? You can change durations and things like that to make your critical path be different. I think sometimes as you're building a schedule, you have to constantly run the critical path to make sure it looks like it's accurate to what it should be for your program.
Okay, I'm just going to tell a true story, even though I shouldn't because it's probably career limiting. But I'm literally reading charts today, and the chart said, well, when the path is unconstrained, the, forecast finish date is X. But otherwise, the project is saying it's Y. And you're like, okay, what do you mean by unconstrained? And, are you ever calculating a critical path that is not unconstrained? I mean, that's what it means. I mean, this is why I was asking the question, because I've been asked in my job, oh, Barbara, here we have the schedule, you calculate the critical path. Well, I'm not on the project. I don't know the dynamics. I don't know all the euphemisms. I don't know all the pieces and parts where they have margin put in. I don't know what these deadlines mean. I don't know what they mean by these constrained dates. I don't know. And I don't feel qualified to go in and without consultation determine, a critical path on their behalf, let alone a primary, secondary, tertiary, just based on the data. There's always so many assumptions in it. What if I pull this constraint out? What if I pull that one out? What happens if you just...
Well, that's why it's so important to have an IMS dictionary, because
there you go.
Your constraints are defined, right? Your deadlines are defined. So as you analyze a schedule and you see things like that there's constraints and you don't understand them, you should have a field that you can go to and see what that constraint means.
Sorry. And I'm going to say praise the Lord. And I've never said that before in my life. But further on that, like defining it, like right in a text field in the schedule, it's available to you about why you have a constraint, why you have a deadline, why you have excessive flow, why you have SVTs. What does SVT mean?
Schedule visibility.
Yeah, schedule visibility. I knew that. I just blanked. Anyway, it was like a quiz. Yeah, that's the ticket. I was just checking if they knew. But, like all these kind of justifications, like you were saying, Amber, it's all about communication, right? It's all about communication, the data dictionary, and then put the data right in the tool, right in the utility. These databases are very robust now. We're not running out of data, megs on our hard drive anymore. And we need to just be documenting and maintaining the documentation so that we're communicating it. So if to your point, I guess, if all of those things were well documented, perhaps I could come as a third party and say, "Oh, okay, I can calculate it now. I understand all these."
Or it makes sense.
Or it makes sense. Like, oh, I can pull this constraint out, or I can pull that deadline out, or I can pull this float out, or I can pull this SVT out, or I could pull out, schedule margin. It's as bad as saying EVM light on this broadcast. I hope my boss isn't listening. But these kinds of things, and it would become more transparent, and it's really all about communication. So I think we should retitle this episode.
No.
Okay, sorry.
Wait. I said no, but what would you like the title to be?
Well, I think it's all about the IMS Data Dictionary.
Oh,
I think that's your story, and I
think it
think we
is?
should stick with it.
Okay.
I mean, I know you're like fancy, and you've had to bend down the whole time to get to our microphone because
She
you're
is
so ginormously tall.
She's so much taller than us.
And she's so much taller than us. I
Yeah.
always think that
Yeah.
Amber's taller than me, but in fact, she isn't.
We're about the
She
same.
just seems like she's just
I like
larger
big
than
shoes.
life.
I like tall shoes.
But Janay really is a lot taller than us. And she's just bending down to accommodate us. But I mean, I love her career in basketball, but I've never seen a basketball in her hand.
It's because I'm old. Old.
So I think your story.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
You think I'm what?
I think your story is about the dictionary.
She thinks the story is about the
I think
dictionary.
it's about communication.
Yeah.
I think it's about it because you segued back to it many times.
I don't know, Barbara. We're gonna
Whatever you want, Amber. I always defer to Amber, whatever she wants.
We'll see how it goes.
I do.
All right. Well, that I think is our time with Janay.
Should we give her
She's
a
wonderful.
minute?
Yes. She's very wonderful, and we're very honored to have her on as our guest. Thank you, Janay. We'll leave you with any closing words.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And this was a great place to do it. I think it's so fun that we're together. Thank you.
Awesome.
It is fun to be together.
And that's all from
Let's
Talk
Talk
EVM.